Hey fam, welcome back to Rave Culture Cast, your weekly guide to the EDM community, music festivals, and more. I'm your host, Emma Capotis. Happy Wednesday, fam. I am sending you guys all of the good vibes today. We have a very important topic to talk about and a special guest, Stacey Forrester, who is joining us from Good Night Out Vancouver, an organization some of you guys may have heard of, but we are going to be talking about Sexual Assault Awareness Month and sharing some really, really valuable tools and resources to create a safer nightlife and music festival space for everyone. Stacey co-founded Good Night Out Vancouver back in 2015 and is also the harm reduction manager at Base Coast Festival in Canada. So she has a ton of knowledge on this topic, and I really just wanted to talk about Sexual Assault Awareness Month and make sure that we're addressing issues of consent and harassment. And so we're going to be talking about bystander intervention, what you should do in scenarios where you find yourself being harassed, how to report it, ways to support yourself or your friends after something like this occurs, and just in general addressing different myths around ravers and your clothing and using substances and things like that. So we have a lot of important stuff to dive into today. Please go and show them some love and support. Their account is at goodnightout_Vancouver. They have a lot of really great resources on their Instagram and website. They offer different types of workshops. And also, if you're an artist or an event producer watching, there are ways you can connect with Good Night Out Vancouver to bring resources to your own events or shows as well. So that's something we're going to talk about. But with all that being said, I want to dive right in. So please join me in welcoming Stacey Forrester to the podcast. Thank you to today's sponsor, Purple Garden. If any of you guys are interested in getting more in touch with your spiritual side, whether you're looking for psychic readings, astrology, or tarot like myself, you guys can check out Purple Garden. It's a platform that allows you to connect with experienced readers in all these different categories. You can browse their specialty ratings and reviews and connect with them either via text messages, voice call, or video chat, which is awesome. There are readers that are English and Spanish speaking, which makes it way more accessible to many more people. So if you guys want to check it out and get your first reading, you can use my link trypurplegarden.com/RCC to start browsing as a new customer. You'll also get your first deposit of $10 if you use code RCC. So again, trypurplegarden.com/RCC, plug in code RCC to get $10 added to your account. Check out your first readings on Purple Garden and let me know what you guys think. Hey guys, welcome back to the podcast. Some of you might be aware that April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month, so I am super grateful to have on today's guest, Stacey Forrester, who is a co-founder and education director at Good Night Out Vancouver. We're going to be chatting a little bit about their mission and how we can all contribute to making the nightlife and music festival industry a safer space for us all. So I did want to give a quick trigger warning to anybody who is sensitive to the topics we're going to be talking about today, whether it be sexual assault, harassment, or rape. We are going to be sharing some stories, sharing some tips and really valuable resources for you. So I do hope you give it a listen. We want to keep you and your friends safe at all of your events. So with that being said, please welcome Stacey to the podcast. How's it going?
Good. Thank you for having me.
Of course. How's your week been so far?
It's good. I'm Canadian, obviously. I just spent the week in LA with some of the Dance Safe folks down there, which was really nice and refreshing, and it's really sunny there. So I'm feeling good. I'm really honored to spend, it's Trans Day of Visibility today. So I'm just so happy to spend the Friday with you talking about safety for everyone.
Amazing. I know that I was going to say there's just a good energy about today. I don't know. I woke up in a great mood and have had, I don't know, it's a good energy and I'm excited to like wrap my day up here with you. But no, welcome to the podcast. Before we dive into everything, because I know we have a lot to cover today, could you just share a little bit about your own background? Like you mentioned where you're from, where you're living, and how you got into the music industry too. I'm curious about.
Yeah. So it's kind of a funny story. I'm a nurse by trade, so I went to school for nursing. Most of my nursing career has been spent supporting people who use substances in some capacity. When I was little, I have this vivid memory of being small enough that I played with dolls, in my room having all my dolls lined up. And then I would had this like vision for myself. I knew I wanted to be a nurse, but I was like this ballerina nurse, like dancing around, doing like nursing care in my ballerina tutu. So I think about that story now because it's kind of come full circle. You know, I get to do what I love, which is, you know, providing for the health and safety of people in environments where people are dancing. So it's kind of like the perfect amalgamation. Yeah, so I'm a nurse. I started Good Night Out with another woman named Ashton in around 2016. And it really came from a place of loving nightlife, loving music festivals, but just thinking that the safety could be dialed up a little bit, and just really essentially like wanting every night to be a good night, because recognizing that being touched or being harassed can really take you out of the moment and ruin your experience. Even if it's like your favorite artist and you're there with all your friends, all it takes is one creepy thing for it to be completely like ruined. So yeah, Good Night Out started out of that. It's in line with all of my interests and all of my projects. And so yeah, that's kind of where Good Night Out came from. My entry into music was kind of through Good Night Out, but also through my harm reduction work. I do run the harm reduction program for a festival we have up here called Bass Coast. So yeah, I'm pretty connected to music almost by accident, but out of my interests.
That's awesome. I was going to say, so Bass Coast you've been involved with for a while though at this point, right? It's like over 10 years.
Yeah. I think
crazy.
The pandemic kind of like, do I count the pandemic years?
Right.
Do I not?
True.
But I think this is my 10th year with the festival.
Wow.
I started just as a volunteer, like most people do. So, you know, doing work at the festival and then getting a ticket in return. And then I just kept emailing them saying, you know, I'd love to create a harm reduction program for you. This is kind of my jam. And eventually it led to work. And here I am 10 years later with them.
That's so cool. I was going to say, do you feel like harm reduction? Because I know it's a big conversation right now happening with festivals in the US, but do you think it's a little bit ahead in Canada as far as harm reduction? Because I know I've heard a lot about Shambhala, for example. And I know that that's like a sober, like from alcohol festival, but what's your take on harm reduction in Canada?
Yeah, Canada, especially the west coast of Canada, is definitely very much further along. We don't have the Rave Act. We definitely do have just more of a more progressive approach across the board. I think the legacy of the war on drugs has definitely impacted Canada, but not to the same degree that it has America. So Shambhala really did pave the way for drug testing and really frank conversations about substances. And so we are lucky here. Like I saw yesterday the good news about naloxone being available over the counter in America, which is a huge win for you folks, but it's been that way for probably about 10 years here. But all progress is good progress, I guess.
Right. I know. I was going to say, it's like, yay, America. Like, we're great. We're getting there. Like, no, but I have heard good things, and I want to show more love to our Canadian ravers as well, because I do get like a lot of comments. I haven't been to Bass Coast yet, but when is that usually a summer festival?
It is. We're one of the first, because recognizing that here in the Pacific Northwest, our festival season is a little bit shorter due to the weather. So we are the first weekend in July up here.
Nice. That's so cool. And so going back to Good Night Out, so when you started, just for anybody who's not aware, like what is your mission and what are you guys primarily focused on now?
Yeah, so we're a nonprofit project, and our whole mission is addressing the spectrum of sexual violence. So from comments up until explicit sexual assaults in spaces where people gather for social reasons. So we have our kind of core buckets of work are workshops. So we have workshops for a variety of different social spaces: breweries, restaurants, coffee shops, music festivals, underground rave spaces. We have workshop programming where people can spend 3 hours with us and get trained and leave that workshop with skills and materials to create safer spaces. Those are free right now. We've been very blessed to be really supported by a bunch of different government and non-government grants to be able to provide this training for free. And then we have an outreach team. So we have a team that promoters or festivals can hire for us to come and be kind of a consent outreach ambassador at their event and do bystander intervention and train people kind of in the moment on what they can do to help keep each other safe. Then we have policy and consulting. So different events or artists, we've seen a lot of interest recently in artists can hire us to bring a safety lens to their show or to their tours.
That's amazing. I want to touch on that too while we're on that subject, because I know you've worked with a couple artists. So when they typically come to you, what are they looking to do at their events?
Yeah, it kind of all depends. I've done quite a spectrum. On one end of the spectrum, kind of one of the most common things we get tapped for is poster art. So another kind of thing I do is create consent-based posters. Grizz is here.
Yeah.
That kind of communicate safety messaging in a way that works with the artist brand. So some artists will just tag me in for poster art. I think right now we have some out with Schlump. They're designed to like reflect the vibe of the artist's art. I think it's really cool when people at the end of a show tear them down and take them home. I love getting tagged in Instagram pictures. So just simple like messaging. Then up to more intensive packages. A couple years ago, we worked with G Jones and did a lot of things for his tour. We did do posters, but we also did like safety cards. We did what we call a safety rider, which is something that artists can provide the venue with very detailed things that they ask for. Wow. So free water was one of them for G Jones. Partway through the tour, he added asking the venues to provide gender neutral washrooms to the show. So yeah, so that was a more intensive package. So it kind of depends on what they want to do, what they're interested in. We'll work with them to build more safety. Yeah.
I like seeing that intersection, because that's so cool to like one, have everything that you guys already have in place, but then to have artists come on who can, help with brand awareness, but also to stand up and show that care for their own fans and like attendees of their shows. I love that. You would think that the free water thing would be more normalized or like that everyone would be doing that, but that's crazy that somebody, even have to ask for that at this point. But
yeah,
that's crazy. Oh my gosh. Well, it's amazing what you guys are doing. And I wanted to dive in a little bit. You guys, for the episode, we kind of have it broken into categories to like really walk through all of the different things that Good Night Out is doing. So to start, I wanted to ask, like, from your side of things and the data that you guys have collected, what are you seeing as some of the most like prevalent issues that people are dealing with in the nightlife scene?
Yeah. So we aren't essentially a reporting service, but because of the space we operate in, we do end up hearing, people will reach out to us with their experiences and ask us to act on their behalf and maybe like try to train a festival. But really the things that we often see or hear about happening in festival spaces or maybe nightclubs that are having a show are across the spectrum. A lot of it is nonverbal. So the types of behaviors that make people feel uncomfortable or unsafe that don't involve touch. So following someone around a venue, kind of every time you look around, there's someone staring at you, making aggressive comments about outfits. I think, as it's very common to go to a festival in the summer and people, be wearing next to no clothing, which is awesome. But we hear a lot about people taking that as an invitation to offer commentary on people's bodies or appearances. Groping is really common in crowded nightlife or music spaces because it's anonymous. So people feel like they can get away with touching others without consent. Those are kind of what we hear of most. And then of course there is explicit non-consensual touching as well. Yeah.
I actually wanted to, let me pull it up while we're chatting too. I did want to pull the Rave Culture Cast audience too, just because I was curious, like when we did this episode, I even jotted down notes for myself, which I know it's like a hard thing to think about, even like what you've gone through at shows, but it's one of these things where it's like, I feel like almost everyone has a story or has experienced one of those levels of things happening. And even just writing down, like for my 10 plus years in the scene, like it also ran the gamut of everything you mentioned, from just like name calling to someone pulling up my dress at a show once, which was like totally uncalled for. And I don't know if you've ever heard of a lot of these situations too, but one thing I wrote down to chat about too is consensual situations that also turn into non-consensual at some point in the night as well. And I've dealt with 2 of those scenarios too. So it hurts my heart to know that so many people are probably going to relate to this episode and have gone through all of these scenarios, but the work that you guys are doing, like we're going to talk about today, is hopefully helping people feel a little bit safer, I think.
Yeah, it is unfortunate. I'm willing to bet that everyone listening either has or has someone in their direct circle that has been made to feel unsafe in this way. So it's an issue that really impacts, I think, all of us. Like everyone who goes to a show, this is an issue that I think probably speaks to them in some way.
100%. And it's one of those things too, where even if you are prepared, like we all have the best intentions too. And I wrote down one story we can chat about later, is even in moments where you feel like you're safe or you're looking out for your friends, like even if somebody leaves your site for 10 minutes, like something can happen in those 10 minutes that you just, wouldn't be prepared for. You wouldn't think that something would happen to you, and it can. So I feel like it's just having this information will hopefully make people feel like a little bit safer and more prepared. But let me read. I did 5 polls, I think, here just to like get a pulse on people. So I did, have you ever dealt with any harassment at a live event or nightclub? 68% said yes, 32% said no. I said, was the harassment sexual in nature? 49% said yes, 40% said on some occasions. I said, have you ever been inappropriately touched without consent? 72% said yes, 28% said no. I said, have you ever been drugged without your consent? 21% were yes, 21% said, I believe so, but I can't confirm, and 59% were no. And then the last 2 was about witnessing things. So have you ever witnessed harassment or sexual assault at an event or nightclub? 61% said yes, and 39% said no. And the last one, have you ever had to intervene in any sort of harassment scenario? 53% said yes, 47% said no. So that was the only one that was the most like even split of I haven't intervened, but an astounding number of people, yes, have dealt with it, witnessed it, seen it. So it's a scary number, but it makes me feel better that you and organizations like Good Night Out exist.
Yeah, it's, people always ask, like, are you shocked? And every time I hear or read, whether it's someone doing just a poll on their Instagram or a formal, academic survey that a university puts out, I still continually be shocked, even knowing I'm immersed in this. It still is always jarring to hear that this is just an issue in our society. Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely. And so I wanted to kind of kick things off by going into some preventative measures that you guys talk about and offer. So I guess just in general, any basics to start with, like tips or advice you would give someone who's preparing to go out for a night out to have fun.
Yeah. So to back things way up, I think that their consumers, so ticket holders, patrons of events, hold a lot more power than they think. And so I always like to remind people that when you're planning out what festivals you're going to do in the summer or what shows you're going to buy tickets to, take a look on their website and see if they have a code of conduct. See if they have messaging about safety. See if they care about the well-being of your patrons. And I like to encourage people to do that research and then, select to go to those festivals where there is, a code of conduct, a plan for sexual misconduct, where it says, if you're caught harming other people, there will be a consequence. You hold a lot of power. So like vote with your dollar and start to consider what it could be like to prioritize events and spaces that care about you. So that's kind of the first layer of prevention. Then as you're going, I think you have your core group. It's always good to do like a check-in, just so we're getting ready. We're hitting day 1 of the festival. How's everyone doing? Scale of 1 to 10, anything arising for you that, you would like our camp, our group to be aware of. Clarifying, who's okay with touch, who isn't. As you know, this community can be really huggy and really affectionate, but there are definitely people in my group who they're not huggers. They don't like to be touched. So kind of, like checking in where everyone's at. I know people, as like the party progresses, they sometimes get a little more touchy. So just making sure everyone in the group is on the same page. Do a little consent check-in. Everyone, feel like you understand consent. Everyone understand bystander intervention, which I think we're going to get into. Having a meeting spot. So if we get separated, where's our meeting spot? Have a group text if it's an event where you have signals, so you can kind of always be checking in with each other. And just try to like keep an eye on each other. I know it's so easy to get into the moment and get kind of like hyper focused, but having those regular check-ins, not just on your group, but also the people around you as well.
Yeah.
If it is a space that has like a chill out zone or, some type of outreach, making sure you're all aware of where that is. Do we know where medical is? Do we know where the chill zone is? Do we know where the dance safe booth is? And pointing out those landmarks ahead of time in case we might need them.
Yeah. Great advice. And I hope people listening to, like, these are things that as a 32-year-old woman, I'm concerned about now. But when I was 25 going to EDC, like I wasn't necessarily looking where the medical tents were on the map. You know what I mean? Like it was different intentions and things like that going into a festival. But I think I feel like festival attendees are getting smarter and people are more concerned with things like that. So that's great advice first off to even look at the website, because people also look for like ADA services as well. And some festivals really don't even have good services there too. So that's really great to consider, like you mentioned, like right off the bat to see if festivals even offer that. But do things change if you're a solo raver or solo festival goer? How do you navigate that?
I love this conversation. And I think like you have touched on this a couple of times. When I was younger, I would have never even fathomed going to an event myself. And so I get so stoked when I see folks taking on festivals. And I think a lot of those are still so important. So, arriving to the site, setting your space up. If it's a camping festival, again, introduce yourself to your neighbors and get to know them by name. Doing that walk around, finding medical. And then, I think thinking through, this is always important, but especially when you're by yourself, thinking ahead of time, if I start to feel unsafe, what might I want to do? Will I, what are my options? Go back to my tent and maybe take a break? Is there a quieter down tempo stage that could be an option for me? Kind of making this plan B, plan C ahead of time.
Right.
Because if you're, you're at the front, you're at one of the main stage and you start to feel people are too close. I'm having anxiety. I'm not feeling safe. There's someone who every time I turn around, they're looking at me. Our fight or flight, like our trauma response kicks in, and it can be hard to think about what you need to do.
Right.
And so knowing ahead of time, like, oh yeah, there's chill music at the other stage. Maybe I'll go over there. So just kind of like an emergency plan for yourself is always good.
No, I definitely like that. I totally agree with getting to know your camp neighbors, because I think there's always this thing with like getting adopted by rave fams too. Like even if you're a solo, like you may not be solo for the night, like people can adopt you at a set, or you might just be able to make friends that you're able to kind of like connect with throughout the weekend, which is good to check in with people. But I feel like there's that culture of looking out for each other. So that's really good. And how big for you is like buddy system? Because that's something I still comforted by, and I still don't like. I will go off on my own. I'm way more comfortable with that now. But if I'm like walking back to my tent or something like that, I still want a buddy with me. But do you guys like talk about kind of that at all?
Yeah, there's always safety in numbers. So the buddy system is like the tried and true, steadfast. There might not always be harm reduction at your events. There might not always be a bunch of safety measures, but there is always community-based interventions, which is really where the buddy system comes in. So just making it a practice that, if someone's going back to camp to refill their water or get a snack, at least one of us, like we go as a group. If we don't, we arrange a time to meet. And if we don't hear from them, we maybe go back to camp and look for them. But sticking together at all costs, running to the porta potties together, going to refill the water bottle together. Just because there's so many variables at festivals, both consent related, but also just like getting lost or maybe being like impaired and, kind of going on a sub quest and not letting
Right.
your friends know. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll quickly just tell a super fast story, but one of the situations that, again, like I found myself in my like mid-20s at a venue I've been to a million times in New York City. I found myself in a scenario with my friends where one of our girlfriends, the bar was like not even that far, like it was within kind of eyesight. And she wanted to go get a drink with the guy she was chatting with for a little while. They went to the bar together. I didn't think anything of it. And then we didn't hear or see her in 45 minutes. And we were like, this has been a really long time. And then I get a phone call from her phone, a complete stranger being like, your friend is outside here. Like, you need to come get her. And within that like short time span, luckily the security had her, but she clearly like had been drugged or something along those lines because she was like not of right sound in mind. And like, we were so thankful that security had her. That was one of my biggest learning lessons, was like, I don't even care anymore if they're going 10 feet away from me. Like I would not be comfortable again with a friend of mine leaving with a guy that she just met. And that was like a huge learning lesson for me. So I just feel like you never can be too safe or too careful.
Yeah. And you can also, either with the built-in features in your phone, or there's a couple different apps where you can, share location. I know I have one friend who sometimes I really do want to put, the little kid like backpack
Yeah.
leash on her because she's just so easily distracted. But the location app comes in handy for that, because if, she has a tendency to wander off and get distracted, I can pretty easily trace her and find her. And I think another important part of the buddy system is not just to protect our friends, from a wide variety of variables, but also a buddy system in the way to hold yourself accountable, that if you maybe start showing up in a way that isn't your best self, that your friends will call you in, like, hey, you
Right.
might not even be aware you're doing this, but you do get a little bit handsy as the night progresses. And I don't want people to be offended by that. So do you want me to tell you when you're maybe, not being mindful of consent? That's kind of the other important way that the buddy system works, is like, will you let me know if I'm making people feel weird or uncomfortable?
Yeah. And it's good to have these conversations. Like I'm also getting red flags of like, you should feel comfortable with your friends to have these conversations. Cause if you don't feel comfortable in the first place, having that conversation, that might be not be the right group that's like looking out for you as well.
Exactly. I kind of have this mantra of like, love your friends enough to call them in. I think that every social circle has, I find, at least one person who is harmless. They're a great human, but sometimes when they're on the party train, they do something that doesn't land well with others. I think
Right.
that this is very common. And so love that friend enough to, before they start to indulge, talk to them about their behavior, because you want everyone to love them as much as you do. Yeah.
Beautiful. Okay, I want to move on to this next category too. So we talked a little bit about preventative measures, but now if you find yourself in a situation, so more as like responsive measures of when you might be dealing with an incident. I wanted to talk about, because we haven't touched on it yet. If you're working an event or just in the nightlife industry, like whether you're a bartender or you work for bottle service or something like that, like any advice you'd give to people who face harassment while they're on their job, just working in this industry?
Yeah. So one of the best tools that a bar or nightclub or event can have is a code of conduct. So if you're working in a place that doesn't have one yet, try to advocate to your manager, to your boss, I think we should come up with a code of conduct for us, for our patrons. I would feel a lot safer. A lot of places are doing that now. We have a whole database of examples of ones, so we can always act as a resource, because that becomes a reference point for behavior. Because then if, a customer or a coworker makes a comment to you, you have something to refer to. You can say, hey, I don't know if you saw it on the way in, but there's a code of conduct, and what you just said to me isn't in line with that. And, I know you really want to stay here, so I'm going to ask you to change your behavior, else I will have to pass this on to security or something like that. So that's one of like the baseline tools. Two, also really advocating for bystander intervention training, so that everybody has the skills to interrupt it in a way that feels safe and that they're comfortable with. Bystander intervention is one of the best tools I think this industry has. And also, you know, especially for workers, is knowing what the rights and legislation say in your area. You know, different states and stuff will have explicit rules that workers need to be protected while they are working from all forms of harassment. So kind of doing a bit of self-advocacy. And if you find that your workplace isn't meeting those requirements, you know, again, passing it along and calling for more protections in the workplace.
Great
But
advice. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, everyone, we always say that bussers, especially in nightclub settings, are like essential to this conversation. The bussers are the ones moving around. They're in the dance floor. They're
Yep.
picking up drinks. They're often, if they have the right lens, they're often the first to be like, oh, last time I came through, that person was totally fine and chatty.
Right.
And now they're slurring their speech. I need to get help.
That's such a good point. It's crazy because I feel like this can open like so many different avenues. But one thing that just popped in my head too is kind of like the flip side of this conversation. But I have been seeing a lot just on Reddit and Twitter and things like that, the reverse happening. So I've seen a lot of like people getting harassment from security guards at events. And I know that's like a huge thing, but like, what do you even do in that scenario when like a security guard at a festival or a nightclub makes a comment or is taking advantage of you? Like, who do you even go to at that point?
Yeah, unfortunately, I wish I could say that like that was an unsurprising thing to hear, but this is
Yeah.
also something I hear a lot, and I don't want to try to generalize or speculate about the reason, but I have kind of noticed a lot of folks who get into that line of work. There are some amazing ones. There's this legend security guy up here called Rave Daddy. He has his own Instagram
Oh my
account,
God.
Rave Daddy Van City. He's
That's awesome.
amazing. And I
Yeah.
will see in threads people being like, if you're at a show and Rave Daddy's there, find him. He will help you. But I know that there is also people who are attracted to that line of work who have very outdated views on gender and sexuality, and who are often the perpetrators because and they can often get away with it because of the power that they hold in the ecosystem of nightlife. And so I'm not sure how it is everywhere in America, but I know that in the little corner where I am, security guards have to be licensed and regulated. So if you are feeling that you were harassed, you know, getting their license number or kind of going above them and making a report is always an option. It doesn't do anything in the moment, of course. This is why, again, bystander and community care is so important, because the truth is sometimes we can't rely on the institutions that are supposed to protect us. So if someone was experiencing harassment on behalf of the security guard, I would see if there was maybe like a ground control or some other maybe more peer-based that you could connect with and start there. But yeah, it is unfortunate, and I do hear about it happening more than I would like to.
Right. Yeah. And I know, I mean, it could also be, I don't know how the selection of how that happens with festivals, but even if there's like a lot of reported incidents, like one thing, again, it's after the fact, but if you really felt like there were scenarios where it was happening multiple times, you know, writing the festival as well and like letting them know, because if enough people write in saying like, we had issues with your security team, I would hope that the festival would not hire them the following year. So that's definitely a big thing, but that just popped into my head because I know that I've seen like increasing, you know, issues with that on social media after festivals happen.
Yeah. And sometimes, you know, you get home, you're decompressing, you're going through all the emotions that kind of happen after a festival. You might be like, oh, I don't want to pick that back up again. It's over with.
Right.
It was just me. Maybe I interpreted it wrong. There is, you know, there is power in writing the festival, because you never know. You could be one of many people. And so even just sharing the details, like you said, most of these festivals use contract services. So that could be enough information for them not to select that company again.
Right. Definitely. And so you brought up earlier, just like the different levels of harassment that can happen in front of you. And I'm glad you said the one thing of just somebody following you around or just like staring at you. Cause that was also one of my scenarios that I wrote down, which in the moment, it doesn't sound like as extreme as some of the other scenarios, but it still is like very uncomfortable in general. So I did want to just ask your opinion on, in the moment, the kind of like best options for you if you are being harassed or you were touched inappropriately, which like for me, I've experienced just a lot of like butt grabs, unfortunately, or hip grabs or something along those lines. So any advice of like what to do in the moment if that happens to you?
Yeah. So most organizations who teach bystander intervention use something called like the 4D or the 5D. I think sometimes there's like 7Ds model of bystander intervention. It's named that because they all start with a D. And so the D model of bystander intervention gives you a wide variety of tools. So our first real option is to be direct. Right. So directly, if it happens to us, naming the behavior and what you would like to happen. So, hey, like you just grabbed my butt. That is not okay. I'm going to ask you to stop doing that to me and do not do that again to anyone else. So naming the behavior, naming what you would like to have happen, or, hey, you're dancing a little bit close. I don't know if you're aware of it or not, but you're kind of making us feel uncomfortable. Can you give us some space? If you see someone being harassed, you can also connect directly to the person. So if you and I were out and I saw someone kind of like grinding on you, and instead of me talking to that person, I could talk directly to you. Are you okay? Do you want to try and dance on the other side? Like go to the other speaker? Do you want to move kind of, not even engaging that person, but directly engaging the person being harmed. Our next option, which is a really great one in case, you're not super confrontational, you're not comfortable, you don't feel safe being direct, is to delegate. So the easiest way to delegate at an event is to security or to an outreach team or to harm reduction. Like tell somebody who can act on your behalf. Maybe in kind of crowds, my favorite way to delegate is to their friend, because rarely is it a whole group of people with these behaviors. Often it's one person in the group. So going to their friend and saying, hey, I don't know if you know this, but your friend is getting kind of handsy on the dance floor and they're definitely making people feel uncomfortable. Can you help rein them in for me?
Right.
That's kind of my go-to in crowds. Then there's distract. Distract is a great one at electronic music events because they're already pretty weird. What you're doing with distract is just trying to make it even weirder. So maybe someone kind of touches you or you look at them and they're always staring at you. You're not feeling secure enough to be direct. You're not feeling confrontational or, wanting to risk being confrontational, is do something else to reshift the energy. So, someone's really, really staring. I might elicit a like, hey, we're going to do a dance floor cleanup. Everyone pick up 2 pieces of trash and just, kind of like shift the dynamic and get them busy doing something to maybe shift the behavior. Introduce them to like your pet dinosaur. Ask them a million questions about the DJ. Like, what would you classify this as? Is this house or is this more techno? Like, what is this? To try to like shift the dynamic. Those are kind of some in the moment responses that I tend to go to depending on the context.
Awesome. No, those are great examples. I think like, again, you won't know how you feel until you're in the moment as well. And like, I've done multiple of those too, I would say, like, even with just being touched in like scenarios where like maybe the first time I ignore it because I'm like, did they mean to do that? You know what I mean? Like, was that purposeful or was that a graze? I don't know. But then my friend also from the same person got a butt grab and she is like much sterner than me and like immediately turned around and was like, don't fucking do that again. Like, absolutely not. And the other thing too, I know this is kind of just like a comfort thing for me, but like, I just move if anybody's feeling sketchy, even if I feel like somebody is like trying to steal my phone or just being like sketchy around me, like our group will kind of like alert each other and then we'll just be like, it's just best for us to move out of this spot right now. So like, that's something that's been comforting to me, but I do being direct with somebody, even if it was just like a friend, not even a friend. I had one scenario at EDC where I think this person obviously meant very well. It was a complete stranger to me, didn't know them at all. I like just got through the security gates and they literally ran up to me, smacked me on the butt 3 times and was like, you have a great rave booty. It was another girl. And I was just so uncomfortable that a stranger like felt it was okay to run. Like, I think they thought they were being complimentary, but even in those scenarios, it's like not okay to ever touch anyone without their permission. Friend, not a friend. Yeah. Sorry. I just went on a rant.
No, you bring up an important point, is that kind of like we've kind of been taught that harassment or sexual harassment or non-consensual things look a very certain way. And we're really taught that it looks like a masculine person touching, harming, staring, making comments about, you know, a woman or a feminine presenting person. But we know that people of any gender expression can be victimized or be perpetrators. And this is why when we talk about consent, we say that consent isn't only for sex. It's a way of moving through the world, and you need to prioritize consent in all situations, including ones with total strangers. Yeah.
Definitely. And there's even a way to compliment people, because obviously that's a huge part of our community as well. And I think it's just great having this conversation, because I think, like you mentioned before with friends, like I've, you know people who are very into like massaging each other when they're doing whatever. And like, I've had to say like, you do you, don't do that to me. Like, I don't want to be massaged by anyone, please. So like, I think having those conversations too, like you mentioned before, just with your friends and like telling each other comfort levels is important, because I'm sure you guys see all the time in these scenarios that a lot of these, you know, SA situations can also be people that you know versus complete strangers.
Yeah, we do. We know that in the general population, most sexual assaults happen between people who knew each other in some capacity, whether they used to date or they had been on a couple dates or in the same friend group or they worked together. In, you know, roughly 80% of sexual assaults happen between people with prior relationships.
Right.
Specifically looking at SA at music festivals, the data tends to challenge this a little bit, in that more often than not, it is total strangers. It is happening between two people who have nothing else in common besides being at the event, which is kind of an important nugget when we're thinking about safety and prevention.
Right. Yeah. And I could see how that could differ between a music festival versus like thinking about myself going out like in the city with friends or like friends of friends, where like the group kind of expands. So you're kind of acquaintances, but not really. Like I dealt with scenarios like that too. But I want to touch on the bystander thing again, because I think this is so important. There's so many things we can be aware of for other people. One other scenario, which I think was really helpful, was a show I went to that was a huge, huge venue. And I was just there with one of my other girlfriends, and kind of like that buddy system again, we kind of found our spot for the night and made friends with like all of the people around us, which I always recommend doing, because you can just look out for each other, even just using the bathroom, like something as simple as that. We would like swap spots with each other and hold each other's spot. But then there was a scenario like you mentioned where if I was like facing the stage, this man who was very clearly intoxicated was facing me for like an entire song, like not paying attention to the show, just like creepily staring at me for a very, very long time. And luckily, the friends we had made was a group of guys, and they saw the situation, were like, what the fuck, and intervened and like stood in front of me and to the side of me to kind of like form a protective like barrier around me. So I feel like even just those scenarios of like finding those friends for the night and looking out for each other was like such a huge safety net for me personally.
Yeah, that is one of my favorite things about this scene, is that it doesn't kind of, all of the hurdles that prevent us from talking to strangers in everyday society don't really exist. And it's actually like quite common for you to strike up conversation with someone. And so, yeah, I think it's always risky. You know, you don't know the people you're inviting in. But I do love it when they kind of have your back like that. And you also named, you know, another form of direct is directly communicating with your body. It sounds like your friends. That is one of my favorite moves as well, is not even engaging with the person who's staring creepily, but if I feel it's safe using my body, or encouraging, you know, the men, the people with large stature, to become that block, and block their vision as a direct means of you know, interrupting the situation.
Definitely. And I think even just standing near, because at that point we were standing against the sound booth. So that even almost felt like a protective barrier, because I knew like all these people behind us were all working the event and sober. So I also felt more comfortable not being like dead center in the middle of the crowd where there's no security around you. There's no one to help you. Like, I think your positioning of where you stand can also kind of be something to just consider as well at shows and festivals. And then the other thing I wanted to ask you too is, how to intervene without being offensive. Like, how can you kind of check on somebody if you're like not sure if they're struggling, but you just want to like check on them? How do you handle that?
Yeah, I think that this is a huge barrier to people intervening between two strangers. It's like, am I reading this right? Is this just me?
Right.
Is there something weird going on? And so in recommending how to approach those, is be super friendly and go up to, if it's like a duo, and treat both of them equally. Hey, what are your names? My name's Stacy. I, really care about safety at events. I'm kind of the rave mom of the group. Are you both okay? Are you both, do you need anything? If you have like gum or kind of you're giving out anything, engage them with that. And you can often glean a bit more information about how both parties respond to that situation, right? You might notice that there is hesitation or someone feeling like, yeah, I don't know what it is, but I'm not comfortable. Well, that can, like, oh, do you want to come and join our group? Do you want to, we're kind of more back by the sound booth. It's a little less hectic.
Right.
Kind of putting the carrot out there. And if they're kind of like, no, we're fine, we're good, they're not taking the carrot that you're putting out for them, it doesn't mean that you read it wrong. It could mean that that person right now, because we don't know the history, we don't know what exists between these two people, that person that we think is in danger could be managing in the way that they know best and that they know is safest. But by introducing yourself, my name's Stacey, I'm kind of the rave mom. Me and my friends are just posted up like right over there. If anything changes for you, just come over to us, or even give me a wave. I'll be kind of within eyesight.
Yeah.
If you need water or anything, because there may become a point where they're not managing okay. And they might be like, oh, right, I'm going to go say hi to Stacy, and get themselves out of the situation themselves.
Yeah, that's a great point. Because exactly, like sometimes it's like hard to read a scenario, but even if you're in a position where maybe you're not staying for a full set, but you kind of, because sometimes I just like to keep an eye on somebody if we happen to be there and I'm unsure of a situation. It's like, as long as it's in my eyesight and I can see what's going on, but it's also hard to put that on yourself because you might have to move on with your night or something. And if you're like me, where you feel that like rave mom energy where you're like, I don't want to leave because I want to make sure this person's okay. Like, I guess at what point do you involve maybe like security or ground control and like flag to somebody like this is a scenario that you guys should have your eye on? Like, any advice on that?
Yeah, as a person who provides safety at events at Base Coast, from the events I work with, obviously I can't speak for every event. Our teams that are in charge of safety want to know about things, even if you think they're small. So at Base Coast, no security guard or harm reduction team member would think you were being annoying by being like, hey, I don't even know if this is a thing, but I've been watching those two people, wearing the yellow there for a while, and something is off. Nothing has happened,
Right.
but something is giving me, I know that the people working Base Coast will be like, thank you for telling me. And then you've delegated, it's a form of delegation. You've delegated that responsibility to that team so they can kind of handle it. There's nothing, in my experience, anything ever too small to pass along. We would rather know about a maybe than waiting until it's something obvious and harmful.
That's good to know. And I encourage everyone listening too, as well, because I know in some scenarios, especially if you're younger, like sometimes even intervening period or like going to go get help. I think for some people, whether they're under the influence or whatever, they might just be afraid to do that or take that next step. But I think I talked about this with Rachel Clark, like just knowing that more and more people will feel comfortable intervening, I feel like we'll create a safer space. So I'm so glad you're here, like talking about this stuff, because it, like you said, it makes me feel better to know, like, it's never a problem to report something. Even if nothing happens, at least you said something about it. This one is for all my rave and festival fashion and beauty girlies. If you haven't already checked out Lunatics, you guys are missing out. They make some of the coolest rave and festival fashion and beauty items, including face gems, different types of glitter, biodegradable glitter, hair extensions, accessories, some fashion as well. You can use code EMMAK to save 10% off your orders at Lunatics. I bring my Lunatics accessories to every single festival. All of the face gems, the body stickers are Lunatics. They have temporary tattoos. The paint pods are fantastic. They are neon paint that I wear as eyeliner or makeup, and some of them glow under black light, which look absolutely insane. So again, head over to lunatics.com and use code EMMAK to get 10% off your orders. Happy shopping, fam.
Do some reflection after the festival. Like, patrons pay hundreds, if not thousands of dollars to these events. And so, maybe reconsider is like, do I want to be supporting this company that time and time again has shown that I'm just a number, that my safety is a priority?
Definitely. Yeah. And wrapping up kind of questions here, I want to know as well, if you've been in this scenario yourself, like worst case scenario, you've experienced sexual assault at an event or you've been harassed or something like that, how can you report that, A? And then if you're a friend of someone, how can you support them if that's happened to them?
Yeah. So I think the first thing I want to say is, if something, any form of violence or harassment happens to you at a festival, one, it was not your fault. There was nothing about how you showed up that warranted how you were treated, how you were talked to, how you were touched, how you were violated. In the moment, I think, getting people to either, medical or some sort of festival at the service could be really important. So, popping into medical and naming and just wanting to have a check-in, or if you feel comfortable telling security, the decision to report at the festival or after the festival is very personal. So you might be with a friend and you're like, come on, we need to tell security, we need to do all these things. And the person who experienced the harm might not want to. They might just want to kind of get back to the stage and forget about it and try to move forward. So one, as a support person, respecting your friends' kind of choices around that. Even if they don't want to report, I would recommend taking a moment, maybe going back to camp and just writing everything down about the scenario while it's fresh and in your mind. Because just because someone doesn't want to report right now, that might change after they process it, right? So while everything's fresh, open up a Google Doc and just dump in everything that happened, the time, what the person was wearing, all of those details so that you have them. And then, support them, validate, what do you need? In a perfect world, what would you like to have happen next? What do you want? I believe you. I'm here to support you. Your safety is important to me. If we're going to stay tonight or we're going to stay the rest of the festival, let's make a safety plan.
Yeah.
What does that look like? Right. You don't want to be left alone. You want someone with you. You want to move campsites, whatever it is you need, we'll work with you. If they've decided like, no, this has ruined it, I can't be at this event anymore, I'm going to go home. Okay. Let's make a safety plan for home. Right. Is someone going to leave with you? How are you going to get home? Who's going to stay with you tonight? It's okay as a support person to not have all of the answers. They might be like, yes, I do want to make a police report when we get home, but I don't even know where to start. I, as a friend, might be like, I honestly have never had to think about this, but how about I take on the work of researching some options so that you don't have to? How about I, for the next couple hours, look at all of your options and then we can connect again. You do not have to know everything. You do not have to be an expert. It's okay for you to say, be like, I don't even know what reporting options exist. I'm from a different state. I don't know, but I can help look. Okay? RAIN is a great resource. The RAIN hotline is, available both for support and to give education around what reporting options exist, depending on where you are. So always kind of give a shout out to them. And yeah, just really, showing up and being a good friend and recognizing the limits of your knowledge and just allowing the person who has been harmed, the victim, the survivor, to name what they need and what they want. And your role as a friend or a support person is to kind of honor those wishes, even if they're different from what you would want.
Yeah. No, thank you for presenting all of those options, because I can imagine you've heard of every scenario, and people deal with things completely differently. So that's extremely smart. Definitely taking away with me, like, write anything down. And then, like you said in the beginning, I think knowing not just what medical is, but just knowing on site at festivals what those services are. So like some of them call them like an oasis, is like a safe space you can go, or ground control, or at some festivals, like I think Shambhala has like a sober camp, and I think they have something that's just for women as well, like a safe space for women or something. So I think just being aware on the map of like where you could go in those scenarios is definitely something to think about in advance too, if you just need to kind of like decompress and think about what just happened too.
Yeah, I think there's so many opportunities to get creative and, build this into, because oftentimes when we're camping with a group, I don't know if you have any type A personalities in your festival group, but like Google Docs, list, who's bringing what, do we have enough XYZ? So like creating a tab on that document that is about safety, like as once you're all set up, your tents are set up, coming in, having a check-in, and just giving the basics of consent, doing a walkthrough as your group. I think there's a fun opportunity to like do a safety scavenger hunt on day one of like, go and find this, go get earplugs, go find this, just to really like normalize the safety resources and experience into the festival experience.
Yeah. That whole last section, thank you for saying that. I think that felt very helpful, and I hope you guys like took a lot out of that section. And the last thing I wanted to address really quickly, I saw this post that you had on the Good Night Out's Instagram that I really, really enjoyed, kind of like debunking certain myths. So I just want to hit on these because we can't reiterate it enough. But one of them, again, that maybe like a victim would think about is they shouldn't have worn that, or I shouldn't have worn that outfit. And you touched on this a little bit, but I just wanted to talk about harassment when it comes to rave and festival outfits, because it happens online. I get comments on some of my videos all the time. It happens in person. And I feel like there's still just this energy of like, well, you dress that way, so that attention or whatever,
right. You're inviting it, or you're
exactly.
Asking, right?
Yeah.
So myths are very real. Myths about sexual assault are very pervasive in our society, and they can surface in people who otherwise think that they're progressive, sometimes due to pop culture, media, parents. We're fed these myths, and one of them is that how a person, usually a woman, but how a person is dressed is an invitation. And really the only thing that is consent is a person affirmatively communicating their consent. There is nothing about an outfit and how a person presents to the world that is an invitation to make commentary, to touch, or to assault. And so if you are going to a festival and you do not have much exposure to bodies in states, various states of coverage, that's on you. You got to get better at, not staring. It is not on it's not the job of, women, marginalized genders to kind of, educate you. It's you to work on your self-control and your consent skills. Yeah. And especially for young men, if you notice commentary in your friend group about people's bodies or their sexuality based on what they're wearing, practice some skills to challenge that. It's so powerful for men to say to other men, hey, that's kind of messed up.
Yep.
Like, no, we're not talking about women that way.
Definitely. And like we said too, and it can happen gender to gender as well, just with me being like inappropriately touched by somebody who probably thought it was like literally nothing of it, but you just never know. And again, I can't stress that enough. Like, you should feel comfortable in your outfits. I get comments on my YouTube videos all the time, like, why do you guys dress like that in the United States? And I'm like, because whether it's in fashion or that's what people want to express themselves, or they feel free at festivals, like, it is your prerogative to dress however the heck you want to dress. So that was a big one that I wanted to touch on. And the second one was that you shouldn't have been too fucked up. So there's a lot of shaming around people who are under the influence, also, inviting in situations like this. I know we didn't talk too much about substances today, but anything you want to address on that one?
Yeah, the intersection of substances and consent is one of my favorite things to talk about. So we can always have another conversation down the road, because there's so much to say about that. But again, when people, a person, got messed up and they were sexually assaulted, again, reaffirming that you did not invite this. Like the fact that someone did not respect your autonomy, your wishes, your consent, did not give you the space to say no, it is not your fault. Absolutely. When people are vulnerable, when they're intoxicated, they are in need of people who will care for them and get them to a safe place and get them back to their tent or home safely, not take advantage of them. People who are incapacitated cannot consent. And so if there is ever any doubt, you're vibing at a festival, you're both pretty messed up, you don't know each other, you don't have a pre-existing relationship, it may be better just to hang out, enjoy the music, take in the art, and revisit that connection on a safer terrain.
Beautiful. Yeah. I did an episode a little while back about Rave fam red flags as well. And I just want to revisit that again too, because again, if you feel like you can't have a conversation where if for whatever reason you are in a position where you take too much or it's overwhelming, you have a bad trip, whatever, and you don't feel like your fam would take care of you, would leave the festival for you, would go walk around with you to get air, like that to me is just such a scary thought, because if you couldn't take care of yourself and I've heard people like being left alone and then other people find them, like, I just think that's like you need to take like a good hard look at who you are with as well. And if you don't think that they would do those things for you, then you shouldn't be going to events with them in the first place.
Yeah, I agree. You need your emergency plan. You need to know, that your people will have your back, because there's just so many variables in festivals with tens of thousands of people on really big sites. There's just so many things. And yeah, if you can't trust that they would have your back, yeah, you're right. That's a huge red flag. This makes me think of a couple other things related to both of these things. One is if someone is in need of care, they're stumbly, they need help walking back to their tent, that is not the time to flirt with them. Like a major kind of rule around, meeting people and getting to know each other at these events is if someone is in need of a responsible adult, that is not the time to put the moves on them. Absolutely. So having
the fact that somebody would
awareness.
even think that is crazy to me, but
Yeah, we do see it a lot. People swooping in as a caregiver.
Yeah.
But then blurring those lines of like, you need a safe place to sober up and sleep. My tent. Whereas what they need is, you can have my tent and I will sleep in my friend's tent.
Right.
I'm worried about you. I'll text your friends and tell them that I'll put a pin in where you are. They can come get you. They don't need someone to slide in there and see that as an opportunity. And then related to how people are dressed, I think a good note to end on is gassing each other up about cute outfits is, a fun part of this. So at Good Night Out, we kind of have these rules around giving compliments to strangers. So one, ask if you can give a compliment. So going up to someone and be like, can I give you a compliment? If they say no, they're not receptive to it, move on. If they say yes, that is your invitation. And then come up with a compliment that adheres to 3 rules. 1, can be given to a person of any gender. 2, can be given to a person of any age. And 3, is not about their physical appearance. Style is okay, but not something connected to their body that they can't immediately change about themselves. So that encourages people to, 1, be creative and not overly sexualize people the first time you're meeting them. And it can be kind of a fun game. You can like write them out on Post-it notes. You can give them out. You can have like a compliment board at your camp, as long as it adheres to those 3 rules.
I love that. That's a great note to end on. Okay. So if people want to get more involved, well, 1, how can we support Good Night Out? And then 2, you mentioned like workshops, like how can people get involved?
Yeah. So Good Night Out _ Vancouver is our Instagram. We're always posting really cute, digestible consent content for this crowd. So if you like talking about consent at festivals, I'm going to plug our Instagram account. Through there in our link in bio stuff, you can find the link if you're connected to a festival, if you're a promoter, even if you're, a group that regularly has parties at your house that are really well attended, you could probably benefit from a training. So ping us on there and learn more about training and how to bring it to you. And just, sharing consent information wherever you can. It's always applicable.
Great. So everybody go follow and support, get involved. And are there any other events that you guys actually will have a presence at as well? I wanted to ask.
Not so much in the States. Like I said, we are Canadian based right now, but if you go to any of Grizz's major events, you will see the Harmony Project, which is folks who have been trained by us. They have that consent lens. They have an adorable rainbow booth. So I can for sure plug that. If you do find yourself up in Canada, keep a tabs on our Instagram. I always, like to plug Base Ghost. If you're, like supporting events that have really strong harm reduction, come say hi. Also, the harm reduction wing of the Base Coast website has a ton of stuff that's applicable no matter what festival you go to. There's videos on consent. There's tons of resources, so check those out too.
Amazing. Stacey, thank you so much for your time. This was extremely valuable. I think people will take a lot away from this episode. And again, like any way the RCC audience can support you guys, let us know. And I appreciate your time. And we'll definitely have to have you back for a part 2.
Yeah, thank you.
Of course. All right, everybody hang tight. I will be back in just a few minutes. All right, fam, just to wrap things up here, again, huge shout out to Stacey from Good Night Out Vancouver for joining me today. I feel like lifted talking to her and addressing this topic. Like, this is something I'm very, very passionate about, and I could just feel how helpful this information would be to people. So please share this episode with somebody that you think will find this information valuable. Make this your Instagram stories and tag at Rave Culture Cast and at goodnightout_Vancouver so we can share your posts. Please go show them some love and support and connect with them. Again, there are just so many different ways that we can be advocating for ourselves and for other festival goers and our safety. So I think tools that she mentioned, like supporting festivals who have codes of conduct and who offer services like harm reduction and ground control and things like that, really making sure that we're really holding, event promoters, security, and other people of power accountable for our safety and really advocating for ourselves is huge. So again, if you want to get involved, check out Good Night Out's workshops. If you're an artist or an event promoter and you want to offer those services at your own venues or things like that, definitely get in touch with Stacey. I'm sure she'd be happy to help. And if you guys want to support Rave Culture Cast, you know the drill. At Rave Culture Cast on all of the platforms. We have an amazing Facebook group and Discord community, so definitely feel free to come join the fam, make some friends, dive into conversations. We've got a lot in store, so definitely feel free to join us over there. And again, if you enjoyed the episode, subscribe, rate, review, share it to your stories, do all the things. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you next Wednesday with a new episode. Bye, guys.